This did not take him by surprise. It's the world that will be caught off guard on that day, not God. He has planned this from all eternity. It reminds me of that passage in Psalms chapter 2 where it says, "Why are the nations in an uproar and the peoples devising a vain thing? The kings of the earth take their stand and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against His anointed, saying, let us tear their fetters apart and cast their cords from us. But He who sits in the heavens laughs. The Lord scoffs at them." Do you realize that on the day of judgment, if every creature in hell and every creature that has ever been on earth, the full lot of all of creation, were to rise up against this one seated upon the throne, they would not have the strength of the weakest among them rising up by himself. It would be like a mite beating his head against a world of granite. This is the God with whom you must deal. Every one of you. Does it make you afraid? If the blood of Christ is not your hope, it must make you afraid. Now, it says here in our text that from whose presence the heavens, or the earth and the heavens, fled away. This word fled comes from the Greek word flugo, that means to literally flee away or to seek safety by flight. Heaven and earth itself is doing everything in its power to run away from this one who is seated upon the throne. The Lutheran scholar Seiss says, now listen to this language. This is old language. This is old language about God. This throne has an awful occupant. When was the last time? Well, here you do. But in other churches, when do you hear that God is awful? This throne has an awful occupant. There is no name, no figure, no shape, but only an awful, mysterious, and composed presence, which can be nothing less than the one unnameable, indescribable, eternal Godhead. There is nothing but the naked presence of almightiness, so dreadful that the very earth and heaven seem to be fleeing before it. Now, this is very common in biblical language. Let me give you a few verses. In Psalm 75:2, God speaking, He says, "When I select an appointed time, it is I who judge with equity. The earth and all who dwell in it melt." Psalm 97:5, "The mountains melt like wax at the presence of the Lord, at the presence of the Lord of the whole earth." It's terrifying. So many men boast of greatness. They will melt before Him like a tiny wax figurine before a blast furnace. Last night, my wife and I were watching some kind of home improvement program thing. And they went in this apartment of these college students, and they were going to fix their apartment. And one of them laughed and said, "What is this?" And they said, "Well, we call our apartment the temple of the red velvet Jesus." And they had bought at some yard sale or something a statue of Jesus that was about 2 feet tall, covered in red velvet, with a little space in it. It was a piggy bank where you could put money in. And they said, that's why we put this here in the center of the room, and that's why we call our place the temple of the red velvet Jesus. A piggy bank. I don't know who I feel sorry for more, them or the foolish person who in the name of Christ made this thing thinking somehow it would honor Jesus and Christianity. But you listen to that and you go, well, that's absolutely disgusting that someone would do that. But physician, heal thyself. Don't you know that you do the same thing? So often I do the same thing. Don't you see that? Not realizing who this is. Playing, as Vance Havner used to say, playing marbles with the diamonds of God. It's one thing to touch something precious to me, to spoil my home or to ruin my clothing. Lay a hand on my child. It's a whole nother thing. Disregard my child. It's a whole nother thing. It's a violent reaction. This God loves His Son. And those who have treated His Son as a red velvet piggy bank will melt before Him on that day. Now, what does this mean? I want you to think about something. Imagine you're being led, young person, old person. Imagine you're being led into the throne room of God. And as you're being led in and cannot stop, they make you go. As you're being led in, you see heaven and earth running in the other direction, screaming, "Flee, flee, flee from the wrath of God. Flee from the one who sits upon the throne. Who can behold His presence? The rivers dry up before Him and the mountains melt." And you, insignificant mite, are now going to go in and face the one that creation runs from in terror. And then think about this. As you're marching yourself in, proud of all your accomplishments, and Christians, this is a good word for you too. Proud of all your accomplishments and all the things you have and titles and ownership and this and that. As you're marching in to that great room, you see everything of this world that is not eternal passing by you in the other direction toward destruction. You will be saved, but as by fire. Everything lost. What does this mean? It means this. The world is passing away and also its lust, but the one who does the will of God lives forever. 1 John 2:17. This word here where it says the world is passing away, it means literally, it can also be translated is being pushed out. All the things that people so much strive after. The things that will not last. God even now in judgment is pushing them out. It goes on and he says, now the next statement, I saw the dead, the great and small, standing before the throne. John says, I saw the necros. That's horrifying. I saw tus necros. I saw the dead ones. Referring to that entire multitude of people, he called them only one name, the dead. I saw them there. Cease writes, the great and the small, the big sinners and the little sinners. That's the word you need to hear. Not just the big ones, not just Hitler and Mussolini, Fidel. He says, I saw big sinners and little sinners, rulers and subjects, nobles, the learned and the ignorant, the refined and the vulgar, the civilized and the barbarian, emperors and beggars, all alike are there. We read of no white robes, no spotless linen, no palms, nothing but naked sinners before the naked majesty of enthroned almightiness awaiting their eternal doom. Now, why does cease? Now, twice that we've read him is mentioned naked. It's a very important concept in judgment.